What if I told you that meticulously counting every single calorie in a handful of almonds is actually like training your body to store more fat?
Yeah, it sounds completely backward, right?
It really does. Because we are constantly told that if we just eat less and move more, we'll be healthy.
Yeah.
But, if you've ever tried a modern diet, you probably know the reality.
Oh, absolutely.
You count every calorie, you eat the salads, and yet you are chronically exhausted. Your brain is foggy, and the scale just absolutely refuses to budge.
And you just start to assume your biology is broken.
Right. But today, for this deep dive, we are looking at the biological mechanism that proves modern dieting isn't just flawed. It's a physiological setup for failure.
It's a massive paradigm shift. The source material we are pulling from today is a book called Fast Like a Girl by Dr. Mindy Pelz. And it completely dismantles the standard operating manual we have all been handed for human health.
And the foreword really sets the tone for this, right?
Yeah, it was written by the Grammy-winning artist Leanne Rimes. She spent 2 decades severely suppressing her natural hormonal cycle with continuous birth control.
Wow, 20 years.
Yeah, she was just trying to manage debilitating inflammation and anxiety that was literally threatening her career. And it wasn't until she abandoned the standard medical advice and actually allowed her body to return to its natural biological rhythm that she found lasting healing.
Okay, let's unpack this because that sets up our mission for today. We are going to explore the science of metabolic switching.
Right.
But more importantly, we're going to expose a massive, dangerous blind spot in modern health advice. We're going to map out the biological reasons why women cannot and absolutely should not fast or eat the exact same way that men do.
Yes. But to understand what does work, we have to look at the failed 5.
The failed 5.
All right. These are the biological reasons why your past attempts at dieting have felt like a literal war against your own body. And it starts with the most deeply ingrained myth of all, which is calorie restriction.
The whole calories in, calories out thing.
Exactly. That model assumes the body is just a simple math equation. But physiologically, the body is an adaptive survival machine.
Right. And the book brings up the Minnesota starvation experiment from the 1940s, which is just wild to look back on.
It really is.
Researchers took healthy men and put them on a 1,500-calorie diet. And today, 1,500 calories is casually thrown around on fitness apps as a standard daily goal for weight loss.
It's the default on so many programs.
Yeah. But in a clinical setting, it completely destroyed these men. They became deeply depressed, entirely obsessed with food, and totally socially withdrawn.
The psychological effects were severe, but the metabolic effects were permanent. Because when the experiment ended and the men were allowed to eat normally again, they didn't just regain the weight.
They gained more, didn't they?
They gained it all back, plus an additional 10%.
Wow.
And the biological mechanism here is crucial. When you continuously restrict calories, your body senses a famine. So, to ensure you don't starve to death, it lowers your basal metabolic rate.
This slows everything down.
It literally unplugs cellular functions to burn less energy.
Wait, so you're telling me that by constantly restricting my food, I am actively training my body's cellular factory to just shut down its own assembly lines to save power?
That is exactly what you're doing.
So when I finally eat a normal meal, my metabolism is too slow to process it, so it just stores the excess as fat.
Right, because it's preparing for the next famine.
That makes complete sense. But the failed 5 goes beyond just calories, right? The source talks about the replacement of fats with ultra-processed, sugar-laden foods, chronic cortisol surges from stress, and something called obesogens.
Yeah, obesogens are huge. They are a primary driver of modern weight loss resistance.
What are they exactly?
They're synthetic chemicals. You find them in BPA plastics, artificial fragrances, and even the natural flavors in processed diet foods.
Oh, the natural flavors.
Right. And when these toxic chemicals enter your bloodstream, they physically dock onto the hormonal receptor sites on your cells, which basically blocks your actual hormones from communicating.
So they create a physical barrier. But why does that make us gain stubborn fat?
Well, because your body doesn't possess the enzymes to break down these synthetic plastics and chemicals. If they remain in the bloodstream, they will literally poison your vital organs.
Oh, wow.
So your body's brilliant defense mechanism is to quarantine them. It pushes these toxins out of the bloodstream and traps them inside your fat cells. It expands the fat tissue specifically to keep your liver and heart safe.
Okay, so that stubborn fat around the midsection isn't a lack of discipline. It is the body literally building a toxic waste dump to keep you alive.
Exactly.
If starving ourselves lowers our metabolism and eating processed low-fat food poisons us, what is the biological alternative? The source points to what our hunter-gatherer ancestors did, which is metabolic switching.
Right. Our ancestors evolved with two distinct opposing energy systems because they lived in an environment of feast and famine. You have the sugar burner system, which runs on glucose from the food you recently ate. And then you have the fat burner system, which runs on ketones produced when your liver breaks down your own stored fat.
And the gatekeeper between those is insulin, right?
Yes, insulin is the biological gatekeeper. When insulin is high, meaning you're eating frequently throughout the day, the fat burner system is biochemically locked shut.
The source uses a brilliant analogy for this. Think of the glucose from your last meal as the food in your kitchen fridge.
Oh, right there.
Right. It's incredibly easy to access. Your body just opens the door and uses it. But the glycogen and fat your body stored years ago, that is the deep chest freezer out in the cold garage.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, if you constantly restock the kitchen fridge by snagging every few hours, your body is never going to bother walking out to the garage to chip away at that old stored energy. Fasting is the mechanism that forces your body to finally walk out to the garage.
And when it does, it forces a massive cellular shift. This ties directly into two opposing cellular states, which are mTOR and autophagy.
All right, mTOR and autophagy.
When you eat, especially protein, you trigger the mTOR pathway. This is the cellular growth phase. It builds new muscle and tissue. But when you fast, you trigger autophagy.
Which means self-eating, right?
It literally translates to self-eating. Autophagy is your internal cellular cleanup crew. It sweeps through the plenty, detoxifying cells, repairing damaged DNA, and clearing out dysfunctional cellular parts. And the key here is you physically cannot be in mTOR and autophagy at the same time.
I want to look at how this applies to something like a virus, because the source brings up COVID-19 and the mechanics of it are just fascinating. A virus doesn't have its own cellular energy system.
It doesn't. To replicate, a virus must penetrate your cell and hijack your sugar burner system. It requires the glucose energy within your cell to multiply.
Wow.
But if you are fasting, and your cell is in a state of autophagy, the virus enters the cell and finds no glucose. It finds a cell that is actively breaking down and recycling waste.
So the virus is stripped of its power source and cannot replicate. So changing the timing of our meals is literally starving out viral replication. That's incredible. But if the benefits are that profound, how long do you actually have to wait before the body triggers these different states?
The source breaks this down into 6 distinct fasting windows, and biology changes dramatically with each one.
Let's start with the baseline, which is 12 to 16 hours.
That is your standard intermittent fasting window. At 12 to 16 hours, your liver has depleted its immediate glycogen stores. Insulin drops significantly, the brain fog begins to lift, and you officially cross the threshold into the fat-burning system.
But if we push slightly further, from 17 to 72 hours, we enter the autophagy window. This is where the cellular detox we just talked about kicks into high gear. It repairs neurons and aggressively fights off pathogens.
And nested within that autophagy window, right at the 24-hour mark, a highly specific biological event occurs.
The gut reset fast.
Yes. Going a full 24 hours without any calories triggers the intestines to release specialized stem cells. These stem cells rapidly reproduce to patch and repair the mucosal lining of your gut.
Which is a critical tool for anyone trying to rebuild their microbiome, right? Like after years of antibiotic use.
Or decades on oral contraceptives, which aggressively degrade gut health.
Okay, so if the gut is resetting at 24 hours, what happens to that toxic waste dump in our fat cells? Because if the body is actively hoarding those obesogens we talked about, it isn't going to let that fat go easily.
That is the big biological hurdle. To break through weight loss resistance, you have to push to the 36-hour mark. This is the fat burner fast.
36 hours.
Right, by 36 hours, the body senses that food is truly scarce. It forces the liver to release its most stubborn, deeply stored sugars and aggressively targets fat cells for energy, which, as a bonus, simultaneously begins lowering circulating cholesterol.
Pushing past that, we hit 48 hours. And here's where it gets really interesting, because this triggers the dopamine reset.
Yeah.
In our modern environment, our brains are just bombarded with cheap dopamine. We have constant phone notifications, hyper-palatable food delivery, endless scrolling.
It's everywhere.
And our dopamine receptors become overwhelmed and burned out. meaning we need constantly increasing stimulation just to feel a baseline level of normal.
The mechanism of a 48-hour fast directly addresses this. When you completely remove the dopamine hits associated with chewing and consuming food, your brain's dopamine levels just plummet.
And the brain has to adapt.
Exactly. To compensate for this sudden deficit, the brain physically grows new dopamine receptors to become hypersensitive to whatever dopamine is left. This upregulation forces the brain's activity away from the amygdala, which is the primitive fear and anxiety center.
So it results in a profound neurological lowering of baseline anxiety.
Yeah.
That is amazing. But, telling someone to fast for 48 hours is easy on paper. If I'm listening to this, probably wondering how someone actually functions, let alone sleeps, when their brain is screaming for food for 2 outer days.
It is a super common concern, but it misunderstands the fat burner system. By 48 hours, your body is producing high levels of ketones.
And ketones are like a super fuel, right?
They are an incredible, efficient, clean-burning fuel for the brain. Moreover, high ketone levels naturally suppress ghrelin.
That's the hunger hormone.
Right, ghrelin is responsible for hunger signals. You actually experience a surge of mental clarity and a massive drop in physical hunger once you are fully running on ketones.
That makes the leap to the final window slightly less intimidating, because at 72 hours, we hit the immune reset fast.
Yes, at 72 hours, the body initiates a complete reboot of the immune system. It intentionally kills off old, damaged white blood cells. This sudden drop in immune cells triggers the bone marrow to release a massive wave of new, undifferentiated stem cells.
And those stem cells can go anywhere.
They circulate through the body and can repair chronic, long-term musculoskeletal injuries. The author, Dr. Pelz, actually utilized a 72-hour fast to heal a severe Achilles tendon injury that had refused to heal through any standard physical therapy.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there. Going 3 full days without food doesn't sound like a customized medical tool. It sounds like literal starvation. How is the body not just cannibalizing its own heart muscle at that point to stay alive?
Because of the principle of hormetic stress.
Hormetic stress?
Right. A hormetic stress is a short-term, positive, biological stress that forces the body to adapt and grow stronger. It's much like how lifting a heavy weight tears a muscle fiber so it can rebuild denser.
Okay, I see.
During a 72-hour fast, the body is not randomly eating healthy tissue. Autophagy is highly selective. It specifically targets senescent cells.
What are those?
They're essentially zombie cells. Cells that have stopped functioning but refuse to die, causing systemic inflammation. The body consumes the diseased tissue first to protect the vital organs. It is a highly engineered survival mechanism, not random starvation.
So hearing all of this, the immediate temptation is to just skip meals every single day. I mean, if autophagy and stem cell production are this miraculous, why wouldn't we just push for maximum fasting all the time?
And this brings us to the core of the deep dive, the massive female blind spot.
Right.
If you are a woman, applying this exact same fasting routine every day will systematically dismantle your health.
It is the most critical physiological distinction in the source material.
Yeah.
Women are not small men. Their biology operates on a complex, constantly shifting 28-day hormonal rhythm.
Exactly. And to understand why chronic fasting harms women, you have to understand the hormonal hierarchy.
Okay, let's go through it.
The hormones in a woman's body answer to a chain of command. At the very top is oxytocin. Oxytocin regulates cortisol, which is your stress hormone. Cortisol regulates insulin, and insulin regulates your sex hormones, which are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone.
So it is a direct biological domino effect.
Precisely. Fasting, biologically speaking, is a stressor. It elevates cortisol. When cortisol spikes, your liver dumps glucose into the bloodstream to prepare your muscles for a fight-or-flight response.
Because it thinks you need to run from a tiger.
Right. That glucose spike triggers an insulin spike. And when insulin is chronically high, your body halts the production of sex hormones.
Wow.
The biological logic is simple. If the body registers high stress and famine, it is not a safe environment to reproduce, so the reproductive system is powered down.
Which means we have to map fasting onto the menstrual cycle. The source breaks the month into distinct phases. Days 1 through 10 is when estrogen is building.
Right.
Estrogen is a hormone that requires a highly specific environment. It thrives when insulin is low. High insulin causes systemic inflammation and blocks cellular receptor sites, making it incredibly difficult for estrogen to dock and do its job.
Yes. So during these first 10 days, your biology actually prefers fasting.
Right, you can safely push those longer 24 or 36-hour fasts because dropping your insulin clears the pathway for estrogen.
But that environment changes drastically during days 11 to 15, which is the ovulation phase. This is when estrogen and testosterone both hit their absolute peak.
So what do we do then?
During this window, the source dictates pulling back to moderate fasts, a maximum of 15 hours. The biological reason is toxicity.
Wait, toxicity?
Yes. Intense autophagy breaks down fat and bone tissue. If you remember those obesogens and heavy metals trapped in the fat cells, a deep fast will release those toxins straight into the bloodstream.
Oh, wow.
You do not want a flood of heavy metals hitting your system at the exact moment your reproductive hormones are peaking and trying to communicate.
That makes total sense. Which brings us to the danger zone. Day 19 until the start of the bleed. This is when progesterone takes the wheel.
The danger zone is right.
Progesterone is the biological architect responsible for physically building the uterine lining. Building new tissue requires immense amounts of cellular energy. Fasting produces cortisol, and cortisol actively destroys the raw materials progesterone needs.
Progesterone literally demands higher blood sugar to fuel the construction of that tissue.
So if you think of estrogen and progesterone as two completely different dinner guests, estrogen is the minimalist who loves a clean, empty house, so she loves fasting. Progesterone is the comforting guest who needs warmth, relaxation, and a hearty meal with higher blood sugar. If you treat them the same, one is going to be miserable.
That's a great way to look at it. Because if a woman treats progesterone the same way she treats estrogen and forces a long fast the week before her period, the resulting cortisol spike will flatline her progesterone production.
And the book shares a case study about this, right?
Yes, a patient named Bridget. She was a high-achieving executive who loved the mental clarity of fasting, so she did it every single day. Within 6 months, because she completely ignored her progesterone window, she developed severe panic attacks, heart palpitations, and her hair actually began falling out in clumps.
That is terrifying.
It was. And it was only when she actively stopped fasting the week before her cycle that her progesterone rebounded and her hair grew back.
Now, if I'm listening to this, I'm probably wondering, well, how on earth am I supposed to track days 1 through 10 if my cycle is highly irregular? Or, what if I don't have a cycle anymore due to perimenopause or a hysterectomy?
The author provides a great framework for that. If you have an irregular cycle, you just start counting day 1 from the first day of bleeding, however often that happens.
Right.
If you do not have a cycle at all, you can follow a 30-day resetting template. You literally mimic the natural biological rhythm by fasting for a few weeks and then intentionally stepping back from fasting for a week to simulate the progesterone phase. This allows the body to rest and rebuild.
If we're completely changing how we fast based on which hormone is dominant, it logically follows that it requires a massive pivot in how we fuel our bodies during the eating windows, too. The source contrasts two specific nutritional shifts: the ketobiotic diet and hormone feasting.
Right. So during those first 10 days when estrogen is building, you utilize the ketobiotic approach. You are deliberately dropping net carbs very low, under 50 grams, to keep insulin completely flat.
And you eat a lot of fat.
You increase healthy fats to over 60% of your intake to provide clean energy. But the biotic aspect is the key here. You must incorporate phytoestrogens.
Like flax seeds.
Foods like flax seeds, organic soy, and pumpkin seeds. These plant compounds molecularly mimic estrogen in the body. They bind to estrogen receptors and amplify your natural estrogen production.
But then, the week before your period, you shift into hormone feasting. And this is where the massive mental shift happens. Craving carbohydrates the week before your period is not a failure of willpower.
Not at all.
It is your biology operating exactly as it should. Progesterone is literally signaling the brain to acquire the raw materials, the glucose needed to build the uterine lining. You are supposed to increase your net carbs up to 150 grams.
But we are talking about nature's carbohydrates here. Sweet potatoes, root vegetables, squashes, citrus, and tropical fruits.
Right, not just a box of donuts.
Exactly. You are intentionally providing the glucose necessary to avoid a cortisol spike. But to ensure your body can metabolize these different foods and efficiently excrete old, used hormones, you have to support the gut microbiome.
And the source relies on the 3 Ps for this.
Yeah.
Probiotics, prebiotics, and polyphenols.
Yes, the 3 Ps. Probiotics, which are found in fermented foods like kimchi and kefir, are the actual live bacteria seeds you plant in the gut.
And prebiotics, found in fibers like garlic and onions, act as the fertilizer that feeds those bacteria.
Right. And the polyphenols are the protective netting. They're found in dark chocolate, red wine, and spices like cloves.
So plants produce polyphenols as a defense mechanism against environmental stress. And when we consume them, we absorb that biological resilience, creating an environment where the good bacteria can thrive.
Exactly. And this really highlights the critical importance of dietary diversity. Most people in the modern world eat the exact same 30 foods on a continuous loop.
Week in, week out.
Right. And when you do that, you actively starve thousands of diverse microbial species in your gut. And this directly impacts your brain.
How so?
The microbes in your gut communicate with your brain via the vagus nerve. They utilize chemical neurotransmitters to literally dictate your physical cravings.
Wait, really? So the bacteria in my gut are sending signals to my brain telling me what to eat, like they're placing an order?
Basically, yes. If you consume a high-sugar diet, you feed pathogenic bacteria and candida. They multiply, and they send continuous chemical signals straight up the vagus nerve, demanding more sugar to survive.
That is wild.
It feels like an uncontrollable lack of willpower, but it is actually a biological hostage situation. When you diversify your diet and rotate your foods based on your hormonal cycle, you starve out the bad bacteria. And as they die off, those intense junk food cravings literally die with them.
I love that. It completely reframes how we should view our health. Your body isn't a broken machine that needs to be punished into submission. It is an incredibly sophisticated system that responds to environmental cues.
That's beautifully put.
Health isn't found in perpetual restriction. It is found in metabolic flexibility. It is knowing when to apply the stress of fasting to let autophagy clean house, and knowing when to pull back and feast to give your hormones the glucose they actually need to build.
That flexibility is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
And, I want to leave you with one final physiological thread to consider regarding that hormonal hierarchy we talked about.
Oh, please do.
We established that oxytocin sits at the very peak of that hierarchy, above cortisol. Physiologically, a surge of oxytocin immediately suppresses cortisol.
Which is the stress hormone.
Right. So when cortisol drops, insulin drops, and your sex hormones are rescued from that fight or flight response.
And the thing is, oxytocin isn't triggered by a diet or a fasting window. It is triggered by physical touch, by hugging a loved one, by deep laughter with friends, or simply petting a dog.
It is triggered by genuine connection. So if a simple moment of physical or emotional connection carries enough biological weight to halt a cortisol spike and reverse a metabolic crisis, we really have to look at our modern lifestyle. How much of the current epidemic of insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, and hormonal chaos is not just a failure of diet, but a biological symptom of our profound modern isolation?
Wow, that reframes the entire conversation. If isolation is biologically keeping us in a state of stress, then human connection is literally metabolic medicine.
It really is.
We started this deep dive exploring the frustration of fighting your own biology. But the truth is, your biology was never the enemy. It has just been waiting for you to learn its language. So take this framework, track your natural rhythms, prioritize your community, and start fasting and feasting like a girl.